Afternoon to those who are attending. We'll just give it a moment for if anybody's in the process of coming through on Zoom to actually, into the room. And then when that's done, we'll make a start on the presentation. So we're going to be talking about citizenship today, GCSE citizenship, a little bit about what the course involves, and then a sort of short taster session, bit of a quiz really, with sort of 10 or so questions, just to sort of further develop and explain some of the materials that are actually on the course. Okay, so we'll make a start on that now. I just need to share my screen. It should come up. You should be able to see a PowerPoint. And it's a presentation that I'm just going to talk through and, as I say, explain the course and then go through some quiz type things. And then there's a chance for questions as well, because obviously this course might be entirely new to you, in which case, if you've got questions, that's wonderful. It'll help you understand what's on the course, what will be expected of you, and the type of things that we'll do as well. So if we make a start with this, what is GCSE citizenship? It's a standard GCSE qualification. It's the same as any of the, you probably have been studying this year as well. The grading is 1 to 9, the same as other GCSE courses, and 9 being the highest, obviously, and 1 being the lowest, but it's the same kind of grading. And the assessment is obviously quite important, because that's how we get to how you get your grade and get your qualification. In a normal year, there will be 2 exams at the end of the year, paper 1, paper 2, just those 2 exams, and the mark would come from those. Obviously, at the moment, we've had a COVID situation, which has affected this for everybody and reduced the need for exams. But at this point in time, the information we have is that there should be some form of examinations next year. So we're assuming it'll go along the standard lines of the 2 exams at the end of the year, and that's where we get our grade. So what actually is it and what does it include? We've got 5 themes. These 5 themes make up the course. They make up the entirety of the course. So these themes are like topic areas that you have to learn, and then the exams will question you on. So theme A to begin with, so that's living together in the UK. Theme A looks at areas and topics such as what is Britishness, how do we understand what being British means, and different people's interpretations on that. We look at things like an aging population. We do have an aging population in this country, and we look at the impact that that has. We look at things like migration and immigration, which then further links into multiculturalism, respect and tolerance, and how we all live together. But of course, when we have different people with different backgrounds, unfortunately, sometimes that can lead to discrimination. So that is also part of living together in the UK. We learn about different types of discrimination, but also what laws and rules there are in place to prevent that or to deal with it should it actually happen. Theme B, democracy at work in the UK. Now, this is looking at politics, basically. It's an introduction to politics. We look at a whole range of things. We look at members of parliament. We look at different roles that they have and their job generally. We look at the person in charge, the Prime Minister. We look at different people in the Prime Minister's cabinet. We look at different types of political system. So we live in a representative democracy, but that is not the only political system that exists. There are things like dictatorships as well. So we look at those and compare them to see what the argued advantages and disadvantages are of each. What else do we look at? Oh, our voting system. The voting system that we use in the UK for general elections to vote for MPs, as well as the other systems that exist in this country or that are used in different countries around the world. For when we allow people to vote, the actual method that is used. We also look at the budget as well, and sort of how the government balances its income and its spending. It's really quite important, especially when we have something like a global pandemic like COVID, and the government has had to adjust its spending and spend a lot more on people and businesses and furlough to try and keep the economy going. So we'd learn about things like that. Theme C is about law. For theme C, we look at civil law. Civil law is anything that isn't criminal. That's the smaller part of this theme, but you still would learn about what civil law is, different areas that it covers, how it is funded and supported, what happens when somebody goes to court, as well as different options. So going to court is quite expensive, quite time consuming, it can be very, very stressful as well for those involved. So particularly with civil law, there are alternatives available. So we'd have a look at those alternatives, and we'd also try to analyze and evaluate how useful they are when we compare them to court. So that's civil law. Also within theme C, therefore, there is criminal law. Criminal law is a fairly sizable area of law, and a lot of people find it very, very interesting. So for that, we would look at the process right from the beginning. So the police are involved. We have a look at the police, the powers that the police have and the limitations that they face when it comes to, say, arresting people and then getting them to a police station. If I were arrested today, I would have a lot of rights and protections to make sure that the police don't abuse their power. So we'd have a look at all of that. We would have a look at the different courts, what they are and what they cover and what they do, as well as the people who are involved, the other people who are involved, so solicitors and barristers and judges and magistrates and juries. You know, there's a whole range of people. You'd be expected to be able to at least explain some of what their role is. So we'd have a look at all of that. We'd have a look at what actually happens in a trial. We'd have a look at sentencing. So if somebody either admits that they're guilty or is found guilty, what different options there are for sentences to be given to them. We would also look at quite specifically youth justice. So given that it's a GCSE qualification, the specification does focus on the fact that the law can affect young people. So we'd look at youth justice and you'd learn more about that. So the different processes, because there's extra protections for young people, they're going to be less confident, less knowledgeable about what's going on. So there's extra protections in place. So we'd learn all about them. We'd learn about the courts. We'd learn about the different sentences that are given as well. Young people are arguably more likely to be influenced. Therefore, they are more likely to possibly be reformed and rehabilitated so that they won't commit crime again. So the sentences are different to try and take into account the fact that actually we might be able to help these young people. Theme D, power and influence. This is quite a big topic area. There's quite a lot that gets covered in here. To begin with, we look at the media, which is a massive subject in of itself. So we look at things like newspapers and TV channels, how their ownership impacts on what they tell us, how their editorial decisions impact on what we hear, the impact that actually has on people. Some people believe everything that they'll read in a newspaper or on the newspaper's website, and that can have an impact on what that person does if they vote in a certain way or just the beliefs that they hold. So we look at the media, we look at possible control as well, because sometimes the media does need to be held back a little bit. Sometimes the media goes too far. So we look at the media as part of power and influence. We also look at the UK in a wider global perspective. So The UK is part of different international organizations like the United Nations, NATO, the IMF and the WTO. We look at those, we look at what the UK's role is within them, what the UK does, and how much power it holds. We also look at the EU as well, because even though the UK's left the EU, it's still very relevant. It's our closest neighbour, and it's a massive international bloc of countries. Furthermore, throughout this, we look at the power of the individual citizen. So whilst we don't always have as much power as we want, when we work together, say in things like pressure groups, we can affect the law. So we look at those. We look at also non-governmental organizations. These are organizations that aren't part of government, and they seek to support and help people in need. Is there anything else as part of that one? Oh, international conflicts as well. So when countries fight wars, internal wars, we look at different possible causes of those, as well as different ways to deal with it, really, to try and de-escalate it, to try and fix the problem, and sort of analyze and evaluate how successful that might be. And our final theme is a much more active one. It's taking citizenship action, or active citizenship. For this one, groups of students have to work together and focusing on something that's been learnt in one of the other themes. Students have to actually do an action. This might be raising awareness of an issue, teaching others about, say, how to vote, for example, or it might be actually doing a more positive actual action, changing something perhaps in the local society, or even within the college perhaps. And throughout FEME, this will be planned, it will be researched, it requires teamwork. The action will happen, and then it's evaluated. So with theme E, you actually identify something, work together, plan it, research it, make it happen, evaluate it. You then take that information in your head and take it into the exam. You'll be asked questions about what it was you actually did. So those are the 5 themes that are broken up over the 2 exams. The first exam takes into account theme A, theme B, theme C, and the second exam is theme D and theme E. So that's an introduction to the course. It's an overview about what it includes. Now I've got some questions. I appreciate most people don't want to talk on microphone, which is absolutely fine, but you do have a chat box so you can contribute and have a guess, and it doesn't matter if you get things wrong. It's just an opportunity to just talk about some of the things that we'll be looking at. So, oh, I made a mistake there. The questions on the next slide. This one's just talking about what destinations, what's the use of citizenship. It used to be that there were politics and law GCSEs. They don't exist anymore. They've been replaced by citizenship. So this is viewed as a stepping stone, a key stepping stone for A-level law and for A-level politics. That does not mean that is the only use for it. It teaches you quite a lot in regards to things like thinking skills and ability to answer essay type questions. Basically transferable skills you could take to other courses if you wanted. It doesn't have to just be law or politics. It's just that law and politics, they make up quite a bit of what you would study here, perhaps arguably sociology as well. Okay, so time for a quiz. First one, who is this person? And do we know his position as well? So, as I say, if I can find it, I've got a Q&A bit. So if you do have an answer, you can pop it in the questions. I'll just give a second for that. So this is Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson is currently our Prime Minister. So he's been a politician for some time. Before that, he worked in the media as a journalist, but he's now the Prime Minister. As part of the course, we would look at the Prime Minister and what powers the Prime Minister holds. So not the individual, like Boris Johnson, but the actual role. When somebody becomes Prime Minister, what powers do they have? What decisions can they make? What should they be doing? So we would investigate that and we'd learn about that. So our next question. So number 2, which of these people have not invaded the UK? And we've got Vikings, Romans, Normans, and Australians. So again, I'll just give you a moment for if anybody can provide an answer. So 3 of these group of people at some time through history have invaded the UK. One of them hasn't. Which is the one that hasn't? Okay. So the one there that have not invaded the UK is Australians. Throughout history, we have had Vikings, Romans, and Normans all have invaded this country. They have all left roots here. They have all left family members here. And we look at this as part of how we define Britishness. Actually, Britain and the UK is a real melting pot of different backgrounds, different histories, different languages, different cultures. So it's not what a lot of people perceive it to be. It's actually already very, very multicultural because of all these different backgrounds that have come into the UK. Okay, number 3. Which of these is an impact of an aging population? And we've got for 4 options, just need one of them picking. Is it more bald people? Is it more money for government to spend? Is it more money to be spent on healthcare and social care? Or is it fewer stories about the war? So again, just give you a moment for if anybody wants to try and provide an answer. Okay. So which of these is an impact? It is that more money would be spent on health and social care. When people get older, they're going to have more medical requirements, generally speaking. So more money has to be spent on that. So it increases the cost for the government. So we have more older people. They are going to be paying less tax. But at the same time, they're going to need more public money spending on them. And a topical one, something that's been happening with the Euros that have been played at the moment. Why are England players, why have they been doing this at the beginning of matches? So again, I'll just give a moment for if anybody has an answer. You can just put in the questions. So England players have been taking a knee. Some other teams have done it as well, but certainly England have been taking a knee before games. This is sort of like a symbolic protest, if you will. It's an attempt to raise awareness about racial inequality. So the players themselves have said that very specifically. It's not to do with any other political movements like BLM. It is just to raise awareness that there is racial inequality. And it's been it shouldn't be, but it's been an issue of a lot of debate about whether it's right or not, given their role as footballers and everything. But that's something else we'd look at to do with discrimination and equality. So let's have a look. Oh my God. Number 5. Which of these aspects of your life does politics affect? Watching a film at the cinema, driving a car, what you eat for dinner, or all of the above? The last answer, all of the above. The reason for having this kind of question is that lots of people are disinterested in politics, or have more important things in their life, or just don't think it ever impacts on them. Politics impacts on so much of your life, whether you realize it or not, which is why it's so important to study. So the examples there, watching a film at the cinema. There are age restrictions on films. That's a political choice. And politicians can change that. There is now the 12 and 12A rating. They didn't used to exist. They were something that were added to the ratings system. So that's something that can be impacted. Driving a car, the age at which you are allowed to drive, that is, again, a political decision that could be changed by politicians. Things like insurance, MOT, tax and testing, all of that, they're all political things that could be changed or affected by politics. What you eat for dinner, the food that you have, where it's come from, that is very much impacted by politics. We have had Brexit. That is going to impact on food supplies. We've had COVID at the moment as well. But it might impact what food is available. So politics impacts on more of your life than most people fully grasp or understand. So number 6, what is this? It's a big building. It's down in London. What is it? Okay, this is the House of Parliament. We've got the Elizabeth Tower with Big Ben. That's the bell inside the clock. The House of Parliament, they're down in London. It contains the House of Commons and the House of Lords. The House of Commons is the chamber where elected MPs sit. The House of Lords, people who've been selected to become a lord or a lady. Nowadays, they're put in there for the duration of their life. This is the place where politicians make our laws and make lots of decisions on our behalf, and it has quite a significant impact again on our lives. And at what age are you criminally responsible for your actions? We've got 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, and 18. Okay. So the answer here is 10. At 10 years old, you can be arrested and you can be held criminally responsible for what you do. There was a case of James Bulger, a toddler who was kidnapped by 2 10-year-old boys, and they proceeded to beat him, do horrible things to him, leaving him more or less dead. He was barely alive on a train line so that they could dispose of the evidence of what they'd done to this boy. They were 10 years old. They knew what they were doing was wrong, and yet they'd still planned it, still carried it out. Therefore, the law in this country says that once you hit 10 years old, you know the difference between right and wrong, and therefore, the police could investigate you, etc. A reason why people commit crime. There can be a number of reasons why people commit crime. This is something else we would look at as part of Theme C. People might commit crime for a whole range of reasons. Poverty is one, whether that's relative poverty or absolute poverty. Some people have no money at all, so they might steal food to survive. That sort of makes sense. Some people might have what we call relative poverty. So you do have some money, but you can't afford all of the things that you want. We live in a capitalist society with lots of advertising, and that can make people want these newer, brighter, bigger, more expensive things, and people can't always get a better job to pay for them. So maybe they commit crime because of that. We also have things like peer pressure, or the environment you grow up in is a big thing as well. If you are influenced by others who already perhaps lead lives of crime, that can be a reason why people get into it. Okay, number 9, we've got Fathers for Justice, and there's the picture there of them on the slide, dressed as superheroes. Fathers for Justice is an example of a pressure group. So action groups just were made up. They're not a political party. You can't vote for members of Fathers for Justice to go into council or parliament. And they're certainly not in government. They're a pressure group. They've done a lot less of this lately, but it's a fathers' rights group who are trying to pursue greater rights for fathers when it comes to a divorce or parents splitting up. And their way of doing it has been to dress as superheroes, climb on public buildings particularly, which they shouldn't be doing because it gets media attention, and that gets attention to their cause. The downside is it doesn't bring positive attention. These people are claiming that they're responsible fathers, but at the same time, they're dressed as superheroes and they're illegally climbing on tall buildings. But nonetheless, it's a nice, clear example of a pressure group. Okay, and one more. The Daily Mirror, an example of a broadsheet or a tabloid. The Daily Mirror is a tabloid, and hopefully you can see on the image, we've got lots of sort of celebrity stories and almost less news, less factual news, perhaps less important news, less politics. Tabloids tend to focus on using slang perhaps in headlines and focusing on things like celebrities. They don't always have the same value or worth information-wise as a broadsheet, but they tend to be more popular. They're easier to read, they're easier to understand, and as such, some of them can have more of an impact on people. So if you look at things like the Daily Mail, which doesn't really bother very often with facts, the Daily Mail is quite popular, it's quite influential, and it has lots of celebrity stories and silly headlines. Okay, so those are the 10 questions I was going to go through. But then there's also questions for anybody here. So it is a course that not everybody knows about, or not everybody would study at school. So quite often that gives rise to questions. If you do have any further questions that I've not covered, please do feel free. You are welcome to use your mic and speak out loud if you wish, but completely understand if not. There is the question box, the chat box that you can type into. Okay. If any questions do come up that you think of later, please do feel free to contact the college, and we will be more than happy to help you with those. But otherwise, I hope this has been of some use, and thank you very much for attending. I hope you have a lovely afternoon.